Sagal, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, everybody. Hey, hey. Yo, what's up? How you doing?
I feel I should clarify for the people.
Peace and love.
That's Tom Hanks.
Yes.
We often take each other's place, as you know. Last year, Tom hosted my show, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and a little while after that, I took his place in the latest Dan Brown movie.
Yes.
So it was... I mean, it is just a wig. They can put the wig on anyone.
No,
it's all right.
What you got to do is run around with a very interested look on your face. You know, that's not a trompe-l'oeil roof. It's actually made of wood. You could crawl around up
I
there.
know.
You honestly can. But we had to go out on the roof of the Piazza San Marco,
in Venice.
You know, St. Mark's Basilica Chapel in Venice, because there were bronze horses of it's got
St. Mark, the horses of St. Mark.
Horses of St. Mark that were cast by some of them. And it made a big deal because we had to go out there and examine them. Oh, and this horse has that, and that horse has that. Well, the truth is, they are exact replicas of bronze horses that are indoors.
Right.
That do not have slippery, wet tile around them.
But how cinematic would that be?
But that was exactly what the problem was.
Right.
I said, dude, what's it? They're right inside. Well, we're not allowed to shoot indoors.
Yeah.
Besides that, we want some production value here of out running around. So you can take the next one, because I'm done. I like to call them the Robert Langdon mysteries.
Yes.
Are you shooting another Da Vinci Code movie? No, I'm shooting another Robert Langdon mystery.
Professor of symbology at Harvard.
And no one calls them the Robert Langdon mysteries.
No, they all call him the Dan Brown. Anyway, hello, Tom Hanks.
Good to see
Thank you for coming to Chicago.
Thank you very much,
It's great to have you back. Thank you. So, you decided that you just hadn't done enough with your life, so you became an author of fiction. I know everybody asks you that. I have been a writer. You have been a fairly successful movie star. Why?
My day job, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a checkered career, but nonetheless.
I mean, there's everything you've done. There's Turner and Hooch. It balances.
There's some damn good stuff in Turner and Hooch.
Really? You're Turner and Hooch fans? Seriously?
Yes, yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
all right. I apologize.
Yeah.
How about Mazes and Monsters? Any fans? No? There we go.
That's a throwback.
That really is.
That kind of hurt there.
So, I have lived the life of a writer, and I have dreamed of the life of a movie star. Why would someone with the life of a movie star decide to go be a writer?
Well, the day job was without a doubt, and you go through this phase where all you want to have is a job as an actor, and that you don't get them for the longest time. And if you're lucky enough to get one, you really are looking forward to the next one. And you will, particularly early in the career, people said, "Why did you make that movie?" And I said, "Because someone asked me to be in the movie." Are you insane? That's like saying, "Why did you cash that check?" They gave me the check. If their longevity and the collection of wisdom is up to the fate of the gods, you don't know if it's going to happen. But as time goes on, you make alliances with other people that would like to stretch themselves and get farther across the horizon from what they've done. And I formed an alliance, and we called the company Playtone about many years ago.
Yeah, it's a record company from your film.
Well, yeah, and we made movies and TV series and all sorts. Some of them with me, and many of them without. And we lean in each other's doorway all the time and say, I had this idea, or someone has an idea, or someone comes in and says something. And the first thing we do is we parse out what the theme of that is. What's the theme? And whether or not it's worthy of examination. Because sometimes people come in with ideas, and I say, I don't care. But if there's a theme that is going to be some aspect of the human condition, or some aspect of why people are nice or cruel to each other, or a moment from history that we don't want to know, well, then that's a theme you can land on. But then you have to decide whether or not, what's the best medium for that? What's the best venue? Is it a motion picture for which there is a myriad of obstacles that will get in the way of being able to bring that to the screen? Cost, budget, people, whether or not anybody will release it. And I've made versions of movies that nobody wanted to release, and that's okay. We still took a shot. But then there's also, well, maybe we need 6 or 10 or more hours in order to get down and really get into it as well. Or maybe it needs to be a documentary. We just got to go and get the facts and present them in an entertaining way. But there's plenty that end up falling through those cracks that cannot be examined any way except perhaps in prose. Now, I'll give you this example of it. If anybody has read it or is going to take a look at it, there's a story in there called Welcome to Mars.
Right.
And it's about a dad who takes his kid surfing on his birthday. And why does he do it? A kid finds it out later on because it turns out he's having something of an illicit relationship, and the kid discovers it. Well, that came about because I started, I'm a horrible surfer, and I have more memories of being injured in the water than I do of having pleasant rides, you know, so there is that. But I was surfing one day and I came out of the water, and I'm going to say this was probably 1986, and I saw a guy in his surfer's outfit sitting in the passenger seat of a very expensive car, and there was a very pretty woman behind the wheel. And they were just sitting in the parking lot laughing and talking. And I always thought, what's going on there? What is that? Is that a lady stopping by? Is that a guy? Is this in clandestine? What is it? And that always just lingered in me as a possible story that would be some brand of a theme about how complicated relationships can be with people, and then added some other elements to it. And that's part and parcel an awful lot of the stories that are in here, of things, little embers that had been burning in the belly for a while.
I'm wondering about the process, though, because you obviously have acted quite a bit, you've produced quite a bit, you've directed 2 feature films that I know of. Those are all very, very collaborative.
Yes, they are.
Sitting and writing a book is sitting by yourself.
And it's often the greatest luxury you can afford yourself.
Yeah.
You know, it is.
Because most people I know, including myself, find that a burden. That you just have to sit there and just not do anything or talk to anyone. You just have to be there alone with your thoughts.
Well, it is a burden when nothing is happening.
Yeah.
But as soon as something clicks, it's like Katie barred the door. I lose weight when I'm writing sometimes because you forget to eat, because you're just you're so possessed. And it is a back and a forth and a back and a forth. Okay, you might like this.
I might.
When I was a kid, Kirk Douglas was on The Tonight Show.
Yes.
Everybody knows who Kirk Douglas is, right? Okay.
Sir Danielovich.
Yes. Kirk Douglas, this was in the 70s or the 80s, and Kirk Douglas was on, and he had written his memoir called The Ragpickers Son, all right? Which I did not read, but maybe I did read it. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. But anyway, you're at home, and you got potato chips, you're in your PJs, you're watching Johnny Carson late at night, and Kirk Douglas is on, talking about his new book. My father was a rag picker, That's how I got the title, Johnny. My dad was a rag picker. All right, great. And I said, okay, that sounds pretty cool. I might have to get to that. And Johnny asked him some question about writing. And Kirk Douglas said, well, Johnny, the secret about writing is rewriting. Wise words from none other than Kirk Douglas.
Who, by the way, is still alive and could see this on tape.
He is 982 years old.
He's a very elderly man.
And I believe he will be here talking about his new book.
I know, because I read some of the interviews with you, that everybody, especially because you're a person of some public interest, everybody reads this fiction and they want to find you. And I think I found you. And I'm going to ask you to read very, very brief, because we don't have a lot of time.
Okay.
Just the part that I've highlighted.
This
is from the center story in the book. It's physically in the center, which I do not think is an accident. It's a story called These Are the Meditations of My Heart.
Oh, okay,
And the character is a typewriter repairman and salesman.
Should I set it up, or just
as much as you like?
Well, it is the story of how I got my first true typewriter. I took it to a business machine repair, and I handed over my typewriter, and I asked them if they would service it because it was beginning to You know, it was plastic. It was this cheap thing, and it was coming loose here, and this space bar skipped. And the guy who had an accent looked at it, and he said, "I will not touch this machine." Oh, no, he did not say, "I will not touch this typewriter." I said, "You know, I could swear that the sign out front says, 'You repair typewriters.'" He says, "Yes, I repair machines. This is a toy, a toy." And he pointed over to this wall of typewriters. These are machines. And I walked out of there with a Hermes 2000 typewriter that day that he gave me $5 off. I said, you got to give me a trade-in for this thing. What? All right, $5, because he just wanted me to.
Now, what's interesting is, of course, that is the plot of this story,
That is the plot
down to
of
the
the story.
$5 discount.
Right.
But when I read the voice of the typewriter repairman, I heard you, because I've heard you talk about typewriters.
Yes, okay. So this is what he tells to the girl who has brought the typewriter in. Make the machine a part of your life, a part of your day. Do not use it a few times, then need room on the table and close it back into its case and sit on a shelf in the back of a closet. Do that, and you may never write with it again. Why would you own a stereo and never listen to records? Typewriters must be used, like a boat must sail. An airplane has to fly. What good is a piano you never play? It gathers dust, and there's no music in your life. Leave the typewriter out on a table where you see it. Keep a stack of paper at the ready. Use 2 sheets to preserve the platen. Order envelopes in your own stationery. I will give you a dust cover free of charge, but take it off when you are home so the machine is ready to use.
A manifesto of typewriting.
That's exactly right. Who's got a typewriter they know where it is in their home? Anybody have it out? All right.
The book is called Uncommon Type.
I hope all your emails are hacked by Russia.
Yes.
And here's the deal. They will be.
Do you live by that creed?
Yes, I do. I use a typewriter every day.
Really?
Back in the hotel, I had, oddly enough, one of my typewriters up and ready for me to use. I typed a letter to my son this morning because he was home in New York, and I didn't see him, so I left a letter. A typewriter it's a machine of permanence. Anything you type on a piece of paper is not typed onto a piece of paper. It's typed into the fibers of the paper. If you would strike a hammer hard, the letter K, on one side, it will have a dark letter K. On the back side, you will see the imprint of the backwards K because it has gone into the fibers that make up the paper. If you keep that letter or shopping list or love note or thank you note in a box out of the sunlight and your house doesn't burn down, that letter will last 1,000 years. It's as permanent as words chiseled into stone. And in fact, words chiseled into stone might get washed away by rain and wind if you keep a safe piece of paper. And there's oceans of versions of this anywhere. It can last forever. And one of the things I like to do now, and when people ask me, what could you really do with a typewriter? I ask them if they have kids. And if they have a baby, or if they have youngsters, I say, get out 2 sheets of paper and write a letter to that kid about who they are right now and where you are and what you are doing, and put it away in a safe place. And when that kid is 72 years old, he or she will read that letter, and they will see not only themselves, but they will see their father or their mother. And it will be a union brought about by an object that is as unique as a snowflake. No one else can create it that same way. It is one of a kind, as different as the irises in our eyes and the fingerprints that we have. Now, that seems like, well, what's the point? You could do that with an awful lot of things. But I think a well-written letter that comes from the heart with typos and misspellings and whatever it is still as unique as Andy Warhol silkscreen or a Gauguin oil painting, or something that was scribbled out by Wadsworth or Leonardo da Vinci. And anybody can do it because typewriters are cheap, man. They're all over the place. You don't need to pay more than $50 for a good typewriter. But if you need it working, you might have to pay $750.
And that's all the time we have tonight. Thank you so much. I actually said to myself, don't get him started about typewriters. When I did it. One of the things
But there's typewriters in every story.
There is. And was that something you decided to do as sort of just as a thematic theme? Or
No, I had done about 3 of them, and one of them had a typewriter figured very prominently. And my editor at Penguin, Peter Gathers, who's a brilliant guy, he said, I really like that little bit about the typewriter in it. And I said, what if I just like an Easter egg put a typewriter in every story? He said, go ahead, that's a good idea. And it ended up sometimes if I was stuck and I wasn't getting anywhere, I would just think, how could I put a typewriter into a story? And out of that would shape some version of, a beat of something that could become, 44 pages or 17 pages of a story.
Again, speaking from my own experience, sometimes when I would write, I would discover things about my own thoughts that I did not know until I attributed them to somebody else. Did you have that experience writing this book? Did you find out?
Well, yeah. There was sometimes I typed something that made me laugh so hard I had to stop, which makes me sound like a real dick, I know. But I'm sure that's never happened with you, Peter. You never
no.
No, never.
No, if I ever write or come up with something that makes me I just think it's the funniest thing, it is guaranteed no one else will think.
Well, here's what you never do. Right. You never laugh to yourself and pick up the thing you wrote and said, honey, come here and listen to this. Because she looks up at you like, I'm busy. She doesn't want to hear, she doesn't think it's funny at all. There were stories that began that I thought were about one thing and ended up being about others.
Right.
And I had to go through a process. A lot of the times when you're working on a movie, you ask this question, is any of this going to work? Is anybody going to care about this?
Yeah.
How are we going to cut it? And the smart director I know said, well, Tom, the movie will tell us what it needs to be. And that was true on some of these stories. There's one in particular that is called Christmas Eve 1953. And I thought it was really about how this man survived the war, came back, had a family, and instead of being in the Battle of the Bulge watching people die, he's setting up the kids' toys around the Christmas tree. And I always thought a lot about a lot of the veterans I had met, the guys who had been there. I always thought, how did they do that? I understand how they get to be old men, but how do you still be in the prime of your life? You're 29, 30, 31 years old, and just 10 years before it, you were surrounded by blood and horror. How do you then go back and start work? Well, I had a story about a guy who did that, and that's what the story started being about. But then I realized that he was going to get a phone call at midnight, just like he gets every night on Christmas Eve, from a guy who was in the war who didn't come back in the same fashion. A guy who will never be able to sit around his Christmas tree, will never have kids.
And that surprised you.
That took me by surprise. Yeah. And there's other elements in some of those stories that did the same.
One of the things I noticed about that story, and I should say that I grew up like a lot of people reading short stories in the New Yorker, say, and usually stories about somebody when something terrible happens to them, be it a terrible case of ennui, if it's the New Yorker.
Yeah.
And one thing I noticed is that there are very few bad things that happen. For example, one story, perhaps my favorite, the one about the small boy and his 9th birthday.
Oh, yeah.
And he's, like a lot of characters in the book, come from a broken home, what they used to call divorced parents, and he goes off to spend a weekend with his mother, who may or may not be paying enough attention to him. Mm-hmm. And this, I'm actually tensing up, because you just sense a little heartbreak. But instead, she's taken by his mother's, we assume, new beau, on this airplane ride. And it's fantastic, and it's beautiful, and you describe it so amazingly, how it would feel to a 9-year-old boy.
He lets him fly the plane.
Who's never been in an airplane, and he's flying the plane. And then he lands, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what a wonderful way to look at the world. That when things are going badly, or maybe things are not comfortable, maybe bad things have happened, and you find yourself not in the home you want to be, another theme that shows up. You get to go for an airplane ride.
You have to ask this question that you never ponder when you're doing it, which is, what do all these stories mean? What is the connective tissue that make them what they are? And there's no bad guys in them. There's nobody that's trying. There's no murderers, and none of them are murder mysteries or conspiracy theories. They are about, I think, they're about people who just want to get to the end of their day and feel good about themselves. And there are many times when it looks like that's not going to happen until they are aided and they are actually promoted along by people they never expected to meet or to help them in any way. And I think that's an awful lot of my growing up in my American experience. You know, I think that we were talking backstage with somebody, and I said, look, I think 90% of the people in this world are good and want you to have the same fair shake that they had. 5% are assholes.
Yes.
That's just, come on, let's not beat around the bush. And a certain percent of them are stark raving mad or not in control of their own facilities. But for that 90%, that's mostly where we live. And throughout, and I can tell you from my own experience and my own just trying to get by to the end of the day at some point, I have met with some degree of fairness, if not out-and-out kindness, hundreds of times more than I've met with any sort of assholiness, to coin a phrase.
Really?
Yeah.
Can we talk about your day job a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
So what's Julia Roberts like? No, I'm sorry.
She's just one big set of beguiling eyes.
I was thinking about the roles you've done recently, and a whole bunch of them have been real people. Sully Sullenberger, Captain Phillips, Ben Bradley.
Yes.
I think most recently, is that your most recent release?
Ben Bradley, well, I just played Mr. Rogers.
Well,
so
Mr. Rogers. People, I think, are pretty excited about seeing that.
Can I just say I have another movie that'll be out before that we're going to have to call the movie that is not about Mr. Rogers.
Yes. What is that movie about?
It's called Greyhound. It's based on a C.S. Forester novel called The Good Shepherd. It's World War II, a destroyer right smack dab in the middle, and it's 48 hours of a captain who has to get to the next day.
Right. So another captain.
Yes. I can't get a promotion to save my life.
That's like 4 captains.
I know,
I've never seen you higher than captain. Now that I think of it.
But the thing you say about playing real, there's an economic model that is now going on in the business of Hollywood, the business of show. They don't call it show art; they call it show business. And part of that is they want to have a pre-sold audience. Meaning they want people to know what the movie's about before they see the movie.
Right.
And real life characters help that become, a marketing tool or whatever.
I saw that guy Langdon the Hudson. I'll watch a movie about that.
Or that guy, he found the Pentagon Papers and stuff like that.
But is that something that I'm assuming that you have a lot of choices these days, that the days when you're happy to have work are...
There's been times when I said, I don't want to do it. I've played too many real people here, and I would like to have the luxury of making something up from whole cloth, as opposed to having a meeting with somebody and have to everybody I have played that has lived. Jim Lovell, Charlie Wilson when he was still alive, Chesley Sullenberger, Richard Phillips, everybody. I've had to have this conversation and said, look, I'm going to be the bearer of horrible news right now, okay? I am playing you. So for good or for bad, I am playing you. All right? You wanted somebody else? You are shit out of luck. Because say it again with me, I am playing you. Now, I want you to know that I am going to say things you never said. And I'm going to be places you never were. And I'm going to do things you never did. But I want to be as accurate as possible.
I just want to say to everybody out there that having Tom Hanks do a scene with you is weird. I'm not used to it. Usually I'm looking at him doing it from profile to someone else.
That is a burden, because I've said this at times, not just the things I've been in, but also the things that we produce down at the company, which has been, guys, our job here is not to screw up people's lives. Our job here is not to alter their motivations in order to give us a creative beat somewhere.
Right.
And here's an example of this. There was a character in Band of Brothers who was alive at the time, and there were a lot of many stories about him, how tough and uncompromising he was. And one of them is that the story was that he gunned down prisoners that they had taken during the D-Day invasion.
Right.
And these guys wrote it, and they showed the scene where he guns them down. And I said, we cannot do that. I said, well, a lot of people said he did. Yeah, a lot of people said he did. We cannot do that. We cannot show without hesitation, with all the clarity of a docudrama that we've made on HBO about a guy who gunned them down. Well, there's a lot of evidence that he did. Well, fine. Dramatize 7 versions of it, in which he did and didn't and came close and almost did, so that we have at least a Rashomon version of what may or may not have happened. And it ended up being 17 times more powerful, and it also made us much more afraid of this character throughout the rest of the movie. We knew he was really tough. And here's the reason why that paid off. We showed the movie to a bunch of veterans at the premiere at Utah Beach in France. And guess who was in the theater watching himself being portrayed up there? The man himself, who may or may not have gunned down a bunch of prisoners. And I asked him later on, are you okay? He said, yeah, that was pretty much what it was like. But we would not have been able to do that if we had tried to turn him into some sort of like maniacal, anti-hero to our...
Did he tell you whether he did it or not?
Oh, he did it.
Oh, yeah.
He did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was a vibrant time, let's put it that way.
Again, presuming you have some choice in the work you choose to do, is there something about the real people, or I guess even the fictional people you're choosing to play these days, that draws you right now? I notice, for example, that most of them are heroes who are caught in a moment of intense trial.
They all have taken on a job, and that job has ridiculous responsibilities.
Right.
And they have trained for it, and they are prepared for it. And they always run the risk of making the mistake that will destroy them for the rest of time. Sometimes getting themselves killed, sometimes getting other people killed, sometimes not doing it right. I'll tell you, Chesley Sullenberger, Sully, and if you saw the movie, this was hinted at. He still would view the loss of any life from that crash as a career ender, a tragedy that would have altered, the scope of who he is as a man and what he did as a professional. Right. And that includes if somebody had drowned in the East River by accident,
right,
or been crushed as the ferry boats came and get him. So the desire on those, it's actually a huge risk if you're making a movie, because you don't want to screw up somebody's life or alter the true record of why they did what they did when they did it. Because you don't get a pass just by putting up on the screen based on a true story. If you're going to put those words up there based on a true story, then you got to get as close to the truth as possible, even though I'm going to say things you never said.
Oh, I remember.
Places you never were.
I remember.
And do things you never did.
I was just thinking, though, specifically about the kinds of characters you have played and the kinds of real life, in many cases, heroes you've played. If you've learned anything about the nature of heroism.
Yes.
A time when we probably could use some
heroes. There is... It's the pressure of command. The people who do the job well. And look, we all have bosses, right? Some of these bosses are great, smart people. And some of them are clucks, but they're still in charge, and so they still have this job to do. They all, at some point, if they're lucky, will, let me put it this, not lucky, but if they truly have the wherewithal for the jobs that they have taken on, will get into that spot where they are not afraid of their actions, and they're not even thinking of the outcome anymore. They will just play it like so many hands of solitaire. And if they do it right, they will win the game of solitaire. Richard Phillips in Captain Phillips. his whole thing, when those guys, they were the scariest human beings on the planet, by the way, the Somali pirates. Even the guys who played the Somali pirates.
Yeah.
They were all four of them the scariest guys I had, and we met them when they stormed the bridge. We had never seen them before at all.
Particularly in that kind of
they
field.
came on looking like the true skinny renegades they were. Yeah. And that was real. We were really scared by them because they were yelling at us and they were slapping us around. And then after the third or fourth take, they're kind of like, I can't believe I'm in a movie with you. That kind of stuff. And
they were Minnesotans.
They were. About the third week, the younger one would say, we were sitting there, and I said, how you doing, little B? I'm okay. How many shots before lunch? So eventually you get to do that. But Richard, I was asking, so Rich, they're on board. What are you trying to do? I said, I'm trying to get them off the ship. That's it. How do I get these guys off the ship? If you can get them off the ship will be safe, the crew will be safe. My job as a captain is to get them off the ship. Well, that's pretty straightforward stuff. And as long as he always had cards that he could play. So I don't find that anybody is resolute and unafraid, and yet at the same time they were preparing, the smart ones were preparing for the worst, and trusting enough in everything they've been through to say, when the dirt hits the fan, I'll know what to do.
Right. And yet at the same time, it just doesn't seem to me that training in any of the characters you've portrayed would have been enough maybe Sully Sullenberger, who knew how to land a plane.
He did do that.
But he kept his cool. But even Captain Phillips.
Let me tell you something interesting about Sully Sullenberger, and this comes back to the long experience of it. His control panel went completely dead.
Yeah.
He had which was a fake thing. He even said, I said, well, what happened when the control panel went kablooey? He said, Tom, the control panel went dead. We had no gauges whatsoever. I said, that's not going to happen in our movie, Sully.
Really?
We're going to have all things going like beep, 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 beep.
Really? Just because you needed the beep, 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 beep,
yeah,
beep,
we need to beep, 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 flash, 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 bah, 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 beep, 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 beep. We needed all that stuff, and he said...
It would have been so cool if instead of because Clint Eastwood is famously cheap, if he had just had you do that.
Well...
we're in trouble.
Because as Sully explained, but Tom, when the engines go down, the generators go down.
Yeah.
So we had no power. So essentially black screens, like the TVs were turned off.
Yeah.
But his body had been in flight so many times that he knew the rate of descent. He knew the speed that they were going. He felt it all inside. So luckily they had the hydraulics. That's on a different kind of system. So he could control the plane, but he also knew how fast they were coming down. So in his mind, he said, we have this amount of time to find a place in order to land. And that's not, we didn't explain that in the course of the movie. That's just something that you bring to it. So you have to take on an awful lot of the physiological traits of what they did and how they got there. And in war movies, they never show the 2 years of training that they went through.
Right.
But those guys in the landing craft in Saving Private Ryan, they were actually veterans of the North Africa. They were the Rangers that were at the Kasserine Pass. You find this stuff out, and then you realize that the reason that a guy like Captain Miller is shaking his head is because he doesn't want to fuck up. He doesn't want to get anybody. He's not afraid of dying. He'll take all that. He does not want to do something stupid. Yeah. And that fear, I think, is actually something that is in all those people in the time cubs. They don't want to do something stupid.
I think what I'm getting at is it seems to me, as someone who has seen your movies like everybody else has in the last, say, decade, is that you've gone from being simply a beloved, popular actor to somebody who represents something. And I'm trying to figure out,
why that happened?
Well,
how in the world? What?
I know. Look, this week, just because we were doing this conversation, I got 2 letters meant for you because somebody thought that I could pass on these messages. And these messages are from people who really admire you, who see something in you that isn't just about a very successful actor. You're not just a celebrity to them. So do you know who you are in the world to people who you are representing these days?
Well, look, I know what the social contract is with cinema.
Yeah.
I rely on the cinema to expand my life as much as anybody does. And I realize I'm lucky as hell in order to be able to, to be given a check for doing what I do. I know the power of either being alone in a movie theater, even if you're in a sold-out crowd, and identifying with something so deeply up on the screen that you think that's me, even if you're at Wonder Woman, I'm not saying it could be of a different time and a different place.
Too?
Stop! Shut up! I knew I shouldn't have said Wonder Woman with this guy.
I like that one.
You can go see a movie that is not about anything in your world or anything within your kin. And you can see, like, I remember seeing The Seven Samurai on public television when I was 13 years old. And my joke was when I went to school the next day, because it was in subtitles, the next day I went to school, I said, I read the best movie last night on TV. But as you were watching it, eventually you stopped reading the subtitles. And Kurosawa, Toshiro Mifune. I'd never seen any of these people, but I just knew this was the most powerful acting I've ever seen. And I was engrossed in a way that had me on the edge of the seat, like any movie of a popular time would come. The power of the cinema does that to you. And I have been in a hotel room somewhere by myself, wondering, how did my fate land me here with so much unhappiness and sadness, and seen a movie on TV that transported me out of it. And I will tell you that every now and again I get a letter from somebody. Don't laugh, because if you laugh at my movie reference in this, I'm going to cold cock you, Peter Sagal. I got a letter from a lady who said, I was getting a divorce. My mom was sick. I was on the road for my job, and I had never felt worse about my life. And Turner and Hooch came on, and for 2 hours, I escaped all of this burden. And she went to bed happier than she would have if she had not seen Turner. That's what movies can do for you. And I know I'm a part of that sometimes. And I could give you a list of actors and actresses who have done the same exact thing for me. And when I see them, I have a tendency to foam all over them, because I can say, oh my God. When I saw, like the first time I saw, I sat backstage with Fellini at one point, at the Oscars one night. And so how do you make small talk with Fellini?
I don't know. I've been doing it with Tom Hanks.
Well, no, yeah, no. And I ended up saying something about how much what La Strada meant to me. It's that kind of. He directed La Strada. Fellini directed La Strada.
Yes.
Thank God, because if it was an Antonioni,
that would be so funny if you had said that to him and only found out now that he didn't really direct
very
it.
Nice, thank you,
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm aware of what that is, but at the same time, and I know that the work that I put into it, and I like to think that I work hard. But I guess what I'm saying is I don't discount what that connection is between an individual and the movies that they see.
Well, I guess, I know we could go back and we have some questions from the audience, but let me put it this way. The events in Pittsburgh recently, I don't need to tell anybody about, and it just seemed that probably, I would guess entirely by coincidence, we all saw the first shot of you as Fred Rogers.
Yes, we drove past the Tree of Life Synagogue over and over again because we shot at the studios of WQED where Fred made the neighborhood.
And I would posit that if the news came out, they're making a docudrama, a biopic about Fred Rogers, everybody would go, oh, great. Yeah, well, I hope it's better than the Queen movie that just came out. But seeing you, I'm sorry, did I just insult people who really like the Queen movie? I'm sorry.
Okay.
I read
it's got Rami Malek in it, and he's one of the greatest actors.
Oh, he's
of all
terrific.
time.
Anyway, I'm just
Rami
reacting
Malek
to the reviews.
It was a little thing called The Pacific on HBO, a production of Playtime.
Yeah, I understand. But I'm going to say that whatever the reaction might have been, the fact that it was you in that sweater made everybody thrilled. Because there's something about the way that you, Tom Hanks, invest a character that encourages people.
Well, there is a countenance that goes on along with this business. Yeah. There is. I mean, there's a reason that Robert De Niro was in Goodfellas.
Yes. Oh, I know, but he doesn't cheer people up.
No, but nonetheless, it's still countenance with a capital C. There is something that goes along with that, and what I try to do, and sometimes I do fail, but I always try to understand that countenance in the casting choice. Go with it, but hopefully also expand a little bit of the horizon of what that's going to be. I haven't always been able to do it, but when it clicks, that means there's just more of something on that I get to do the job that Shakespeare says, which is to hold the mirror up to nature. That's what I'm trying to do. And I realize that I bring a bill of goods along with it. That's not a bad thing. Here's the only time that it's bad.
Yeah.
Is when all reviews about your movies, the first 3 paragraphs about all the other movies you've done.
Right.
And now you're doing this one too.
Right.
Well, Tom Hanks, who did this and that and the Da Vinci Code and was, Ben blah, blah, da, 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 da. Well, now he's trying to play Ben Bradley of the Washington Post, and it's...
He's no Jason Robards.
Because here's you and I are more or less of the same. I started working the same year the video cassette recorder was put on the market. That means that my movies or anything I'd ever done, as long as it came out on video and then DVD and then on Netflix, will be seen for the rest of time, any damn time anybody wants.
Right.
In the old days, you had to wait till they came on or played at a revival house, and maybe you remembered them the one time you saw them. So that countenance thing goes along even farther now, because I've been the babysitter for an awful lot of kids.
Oh, I know.
All right, Mom and Dad are about to go out. We've rented big. You get to see it. I know, you've seen it again. We have Splash 2. You can watch Splash if you want to. Just remember, we cried at the end of Turner and Hooch. We cried. But we'll be, so I know that I've been there. And that's just the beauty of the art form, is that it is revisited constantly.
We have a couple of questions from members of the audience who submitted them earlier. We've selected a few. We'll put them up on the screen.
Oh, really?
I think, yes.
See, I thought this was a temporary graphic.
No. This is as good as it gets. Oh, my God. They've been actually...
Have we been doing that? Has that been going on the whole time?
Really?
So you get to say, I read the best interview with Tom Hanks last night. Anybody deaf that is actually doing that? Anybody hearing him?
Hello, I am the person typing the captions.
That's me. Let's hear it for this guy.
Wherever you are.
Are they up there? Or are they back here? I commend you. Okay, there you are.
That's great. We actually do have some questions from you, so if we can put them up.
That is hilarious. I'm sorry. That is just fantastic. I'm sorry. That is truly fantastic.
Yeah,
Which character in your book, write this as I write it, which character in your book do you love the most and why, says Jill Folan. There you go. We want Jill's name up there twice. I think that's fabulous. There you go. Well, loving the most is one thing. Identifying strongly with them is another. I mean, look, I love them all. There's just no doubt about it. And some of them are all quasi versions of something that I remember from growing up. I will tell you this, that there's a story in there that is called Go See Costa.
Yeah.
That is about, essentially, it is a version of the story of my father-in-law, who escaped Bulgaria right after the war, and escaped Bulgaria in harrying, horrifying ways. I mean, this was a guy who was tortured by the communists, who was kidnapped in Greece and taken back to Bulgaria and thrown into prison and beaten and tortured because he dared leave the communist country. And I knew that I was going to write that as soon as that was actually the second story that I wrote for the book. Long ago, my son Chester had just been born, and I got up early with him. And Dad, he was well retired. He always got up early as well. We would have coffee. God, I tell you. No, I like to get up early in the morning. No, it's good. I'm going to sweep. I'm going to have my coffee. It's good. I like it. Yeah, so you're happy. Oh, I tell you. God bless America. God bless the greatest country. He was a bartender. That's how he, raised his kids. But God bless America. And I say, hey, Dad, how did you come to America? And for the better part of 2 hours, he told me the story that is more or less what is in Go See Costa, which was bent on daring, luck, and the odd goodness of a number of people who just
once again, the odd goodness of people.
Goodness of fair people that didn't give him an easy time, but were fair to him. And after it was done, and my wife woke up later on, the day got on it, so I said, what'd you do this morning with Chet? Oh, he was fine. I was just talking to your dad. My God, he told me the story of how he came to America. And my wife said, how did he come to America? Because he never told her. Because he was just a guy that made it. He made it through the day. He wasn't doing anything spectacular. He didn't know that he was an absolute friggin' Superman, that against every conceivable odd, he was able to get to where he was today. He was just a son Ibrahimov from the old country. And so when you can get to answer Jill Folan's question, which character in the book do you love the most? And well, I'm going to say it's Dad. There you go. Thanks, Jill.
Next question, please.
Pat. I'm fond of Palatino. I like a good Palatino. Pretty good. If you write on an Apple, there's nothing wrong with American typewriter. That's a good font. I'm not big on the boring fonts like are being typed on the screen right now. I like a font with character. I like a font that maybe is not necessarily needed to be seen by 2,000 people from 800 feet away.
Do you have one of those Selectrics with the little type balls?
I do. I have a couple of them.
Yeah.
I have about 200 typewriters, and I rotate them into use. And they all the good. Some are objects of art that will never be used, but the others there's no reason to have a typewriter unless it actually works. So you don't need more than one. You only need one typewriter. And if there's 249 people here that would like to take one home, I need to get rid of some typewriters.
Jay Leno has cars. You have typewriters. Next question, please.
President Obama said of you when you received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, he is a good man, all right, which is the best title you can have. This is the very same reason that you have been my favorite actor. Oh, come on. It's Corinda Walls since I was a little girl. Can you talk about how to be a good man, to be someone known for his integrity in an industry where that kind of reputation is somewhat, well, let me tell you, Corinda. Start every morning with a Bloody Mary. Please flick that away. That is, God bless you. That's very nice. Okay, that's lovely to hear. And I think I might have talked about it a little bit here in the course of it. When I grew up, America, the country we're in, was fraught with difficulties that we talked about all the time.
You can imagine what that would be like.
There were injustices there were, I mean, in school, in the dynamics of everything, we were aware that, there was oceans of trouble that were everywhere. But we were also operating on a type of faith as well as a type of instruction that said, America is a place where you make things better, that you work at it, that the best way in order to make things better is to be fair. That means everybody has the same opportunity, that they can blow if they want to, in which case they made their choices. But if you want to make your community better or make somehow solve problems, you have to get together with like-minded people, and you have to respect certain things. That is, in fact, what made us Americans. Respect for the law, respect for each other, respect for your neighbor. No exceptions. And that's the ethic that I got, naive or goody two-shoes or whatever it is you would like to call it. And I saw that. I grew up in Oakland, California, a place that was rife with all sorts of difficulties, all sorts of troubles. But when I got on a bus, an AC Transit bus, for 15 cents, which would take you anywhere in the city, every color of the rainbow was on that bus. And the only thing that happened on that bus was it stopped, people got off, and people got on. That, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was an extraordinary experience to have day after day after day after day. So translate this to later on, well, where does this come into process, and what does it mean in the bigger macro focus? So I'll tell you this story. When we were in Philadelphia, and we were making the movie Philadelphia, we had time off to go see some of Philadelphia. So what do you do when you're in Philadelphia? Well, you see the Liberty Bell. So we went down, saw the Liberty Bell. It was freezing cold outside, so there weren't a lot of people. And we went to Independence Hall. And Independence Hall was, you know, there's the House of Congress down on one side, there's the House of the Senate on the other, and upstairs was the Supreme Court, the original stuff. And we went up there, and an employee of our government, a federal government employee, by that I mean a park ranger, yes, with a green thing with the Smokey the Bear hat. He was going through his things there. That the furniture here are all recreations, none of them the actual do, although we do think that that chair and that candlestick on the table are from the same era. Whether or not they were placed here or not, we don't know. But we do believe the ages of those do date back to colonial times at the time of the Declaration of Independence. What is unique about this room is not just that it was the first sitting of the Supreme Court of the United States, but on that riser there, in that very spot, when John Adams was sworn in as the second president of the United States, with his predecessor George Washington president of the room, surrendering power to him in a lawful manner in which there was no revolution nor death, it was the first time in recorded human history where the leadership of a nation changed hands without death or bloodshed being the cause. And the hair blew off the back of my neck. So I'm sitting there with my kid, having grown up, and I realized that when they decided to do that, the only people could vote were white landowners.
Yes.
If you were a slave, you were not even a free human being, and if you were colored, you were only 3/5 of a human being. Women were not allowed to vote. Look where we had come from that time. And consider me a dope, but I make a direct connection between that and the lessons that I learned when I was a kid. And I grew up in I moved 8 million times, and I grew up in every kind of, I lived in bad neighborhoods, good neighborhoods. I lived in apartment complexes that stretched to the horizon. I lived lawless. I lived bad. I had families that were tight. I had families that were, fractured. But what was always there was this understanding that outside the house there was a fairness that was always held in the balance by the good people. So the good people made it a point to be fair to each other. And so I'm delighted to be called by Corinda Walls, a good person. And I think it's because I am an American and I have been raised by good, fair people, and I want to be just like them. How's that?
We have one more question from the audience.
Describe the perfect sandwich. Oh, I love laughter. Oh, yeah. All right. Michelle Welch, the perfect sandwich does not have bread. Here's why it does not have bread to me. I have type 2 diabetes, which comes about, it's okay, it's manageable. And it comes about because I just ate crap all my life and I paid the price. So I go to my, do you have diabetes or anything like that?
No, not that last
Anything, any problems at all?
No, I have no problems.
Hypertension?
No. My life is good.
Cough. No, I'm going to get down. Just give me a cough. So I was meeting with a nutritionist in my diabetes doctor's office, and she was going like, okay, all right, your blood sugars are still too high. It's still monkeying around. I don't like the way your insulin jumps back and forth on this kind of thing. So let's talk about what do you have for breakfast? And I told her what I had for breakfast. She says, change that. Don't eat that. Eat this instead. I said, okay. I said, I have like oatmeal, and I'll try to have some, sugar-free syrup on it. Put an egg in there, and it'll be okay. The answer to everything was put an egg in there.
Yeah.
Okay. So it came around, and what do you have for lunch? What do you have for dinner? And she says, sugar is about the dumbest thing you could eat. I said, yeah, I know. And she says, yeah, you eat sugar, don't you? I said, no. I don't. So we were talking, and he said, okay, look, stupid. Here's what you can do. You want to have a beer every now and again? Have a beer every now and again. You want to have a martini every now and again? Have a martini every now and again. But don't eat rice, and don't eat potatoes, and understand this. Bread is poison for you. I'm the type of metabolism that if I eat anything that turns into sugar in my body, that's why I have type 2 diabetes. So, a young lady, Michelle, the perfect sandwich, alas, has no bread. You want to play around with spelt, go right ahead till the cows come home. You want to try gluten-free bread, maybe, maybe not, go ahead. If you could stand the taste of gluten-free bread, go right ahead. Along with it, I will say that this is what I used to make for my kids when they would go off to summer camp. I would make them what I called A-bomb sandwiches. Which is every kind of cheese that is in the drawer, every kind of cold cut that is in the drawer, some lettuce that is in the drawer, mustard and mayonnaise. Ideally, it's that thick.
Sure.
So I'm going to say cold cuts and cheese, because I can eat paleo, without bread, wrapped in lettuce.
Yeah.
Michelle, perfect sandwich.
I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask one last question, because we got to wrap it up. But and this weirdly is a question. The last person I asked this was James Comey, who I interviewed, and I'll ask it to you.
Hot dog.
I know. I asked him because he obviously.
You interviewed James Comey?
I did.
On this stage?
No, on actually the stage of Wolf Trap in Virginia.
Wow.
He's exceptionally tall.
He's like 6'4".
He's like 6'8".
Yeah.
It's terrifying. Anyway.
It's terrifying.
It really is.
Yes, but that way he's so smart he gets to look down on everybody.
It's true, and
he gets to speak down.
Does, but that's
was
not,
this for the show?
This
or
was.
Oh, okay. So this is for wait.
I just he and I get together for lunch.
Well, okay.
I asked him this question because he obviously knew all these secrets of national security and what's been going on of late that we do not know. I'm going to ask you this question because in addition to being a pretty well-known actor and author, you are a student of history. You are a producer of popular entertainments based on history and documentaries. You're someone who knows a lot, as you just demonstrated, about America and what makes it actually great. Here's the question. Are we going to be okay? In your opinion, you're not responsible. You're not in charge, sadly.
The answer is potentially sure. Absolutely, because we have been through worse. We have. And we have this amazing thing that comes around every now and again, which guarantees us to have the leaders we want or the leaders we deserve. And it's this weird thing that I first read about, I think maybe in my weekly reader when I was 4 years old. They're called elections.
Yes.
In which I'm not sure which is more important, putting into office the people we want or yanking out of office the people we don't want, because they're both sides of the same Democratic coin. But I cannot help but know this collection of words and not see in it the path to all of us being okay. And here's what the words are. Ready?
Ready.
I might screw up some of them, so don't hold me back. And Mr. Caption Man, get ready to go. Ready? Here are the words that must be interpreted by all of us in our own individual way. but do aim at the same common goal for all of us, no matter how we interpret them. And here's what the words are. We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, to establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility, to provide for the common defense and to promote the general welfare, and to guarantee the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, do hereby ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. No matter who we are, and no matter what our definitions of blessings of liberty, general welfare, the common defense, all comes down to what the real goal of our entire nation is about, and that is to form a more perfect union. And in order to have a more perfect anything, periodically, you got to clean house. And hopefully, the people that you put into office, the men, the women, the people you take out, are the folks that will take their, what's the word I'm looking for, their mandate deeply into heart and be what? Be fair and be good.
I'm just going to say.
Can you go back up to the preamble? Can you do that?
Is what he wants.
Can you go back up to the preamble, or is there a backside? Oh, type applause. There you go. Just before, speaking of people, do be with Kevin Turk and the folks from International Tom Hanks Day. Are they here?
Yes, there is an international.
There we go. There we go. These folks started off just for excuses to have a beer bust in some bar somewhere on the north side, and now they've helped supply all sorts of funds for some really great charities. God, thanks, good to see you here. And also, some of the class of the interns of Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival 1977 through 1978. You guys here too? Glad you're here. Thanks for coming.
You wouldn't say it, so I will. I know, like every actor I know, no matter how successful, you present yourself as an actor, a guy pursuing his trade, which you do very well. But it seems to me that in the last decade or more, the roles you've chosen, the films you've produced, the performances you've given, have served a role, and that is to show us again and again and again in a convincing way what actual human courage, integrity, and goodness looks like in action. And for that, I am going to say that you, not only do you play them, but are a hero. Tom Hanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Thanks for coming out.